The first time Adam Reyes opened his door in nothing but a towel, I forgot how to speak. I knocked twice, package tucked under one arm, already rehearsing the same 3 words I said to every customer. "Sign here, please," when the door swung open and the words just left me. He stood there with his dark hair dripping onto his shoulders, one hand braced on the doorframe, a white towel slung low around his hips like he hadn't even considered that a stranger might be standing there. He wasn't embarrassed. He just smiled, easy and unbothered, like this was a completely normal way to greet someone. "Sorry, man, just got out of the shower," he said, reaching for the package before I'd even fully registered I was still holding it out. "You're new on this route, right?" I nodded. That was all I could manage. "My name is Eli Turner. I'm 23, and I deliver packages for a living, a job that mostly consists of dogs barking at me and old men complaining about porch theft." Nothing about it had prepared me for a guy who looked like he'd walked out of a cologne ad, answering his door, dripping wet, grinning at me like we were already friends. "Eli," I said finally, tapping my name tag like an idiot because apparently I needed visual proof I still had a functioning brain. "Adam," he said, and stuck his hand out, the one that wasn't holding a towel closed. Like a handshake was a perfectly normal thing to offer a delivery driver he'd known for 11 seconds. I shook it. His grip was warm and sure, and he held on maybe half a second longer than he needed to. Or maybe I imagined that. I've replayed it enough times since that I honestly can't tell anymore where memory ends and wanting begins. "See you around, Eli," he said, and shut the door. I stood on his porch for a stupid amount of time before I remembered I had 11 more stops before noon. That should have been the end of it. One weird, funny story to tell my roommate over dinner. This guy answered the door in a towel. Can you believe that? And then never think about it again. Except 3 days later, I had another package for the same address, and I found myself checking the manifest twice to make sure it was really his house. And there was a small, traitorous part of me that felt something close to relief when it was. He answered in a towel again. "We got to stop meeting like this," he said, and laughed at his own joke before I could decide whether it was funny. There was something magnetic about him. Not just the obvious thing, the easy confidence, the towel he clearly wasn't self-conscious about, but the way he looked at me like I was worth looking at. Like I was a person and not just a uniform holding a box. "You always answer the door half-dressed?" I asked because apparently 3 days had been enough time to grow a spine. "Only for cute delivery guys," he said, and winked, and took his package, and shut the door before I could figure out if he meant it or if he said that to everyone. I thought about that wink for the rest of my shift. I thought about it that night, lying in bed, staring at my ceiling fan going in slow circles, telling myself it didn't mean anything that guys like Adam, confident, easy, gorgeous, flirted with everyone because it cost them nothing. It was probably just how he talked. It didn't have to mean he'd noticed me the way I'd noticed him. But I hoped it did. God, I hoped it did. Here's the thing about my life at the time. I wasn't out to anyone except my roommate, Marcus, and even it had taken me 2 years of dodging the truth before I finally said it out loud in his car outside a gas station, staring straight ahead, because I couldn't look at him while I said it. My family was the kind of family where things like that got quietly absorbed into silence rather than acknowledged. So I'd learned early to keep the parts of myself that felt dangerous folded up small, tucked away where nobody would go looking. Adam Reyes did not fold anything away. That was the first thing I noticed about him beyond the obvious. He existed loudly, comfortably, like a person who had never once had to shrink himself to fit into a room. Every time I saw him, whether it was the towel or, on the days I got unlucky, gray sweatpants and a t-shirt that fit him too well, he talked to me like there was nothing complicated about talking to me. He asked about my day. He remembered that I'd mentioned my dog was sick and asked how she was doing 3 weeks later, like he'd actually been keeping track. Nobody had ever kept track of me like that before. By the 5th or 6th delivery, we'd developed something like a rhythm. He'd hear the truck before I even knocked. I don't know how. Maybe he just recognized the engine. And he'd have the door open before I got up the steps, holding 2 mugs sometimes, offering me coffee. I always declined because I was on the clock and always secretly wished I could accept. "One of these days you're going to say yes," he told me once, leaning against his doorframe, arms crossed, that half smile on his face that I had started to think about at inconvenient times, driving, showering, lying awake. "One of these days I might," I said, and his smile widened like I'd given him something. The package that changed things arrived on a Tuesday in October, gray sky, the kind of day that smelled like rain even before it started falling. It was a big box, awkward to carry, and by the time I got up his front steps, the sky had opened up and I was soaked through my uniform shirt sticking to my back, water running down my collar. Adam opened the door, and his easy smile dropped the second he saw me. "Eli, you're drenched. Get in here. I've got more stops." "You've got exactly 0 more stops until this lets up," he said, and there was something in his voice that didn't leave room for argument. Not bossy, just certain, the way people are certain when they actually care about the outcome. He stepped back from the door, an unmistakable invitation, and I found myself walking through it before I'd consciously decided to. His apartment smelled like cedar and coffee. It was cleaner than I expected, warmer too, low lamps instead of overheads, a blanket thrown over the back of a worn leather couch like someone had just gotten up from under it. He disappeared for a moment and came back with a towel, an actual different towel, not the one he usually answered the door in, and a dry t-shirt that he pressed into my hands without asking. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said. "I want to. Bathroom's down the hall if you want to change." I stood in his bathroom a minute longer than necessary, looking at myself in the mirror, water dripping off my hair, his shirt in my hands. It smelled like him, like cedar and something warmer underneath, and I had to have a very stern conversation with myself about keeping it together, about not reading into a rainstorm and a borrowed shirt the way my chest wanted to read into it. When I came back out, he'd made 2 mugs of coffee, and this time he didn't offer it like a joke. He just handed me one and sat down on the couch and looked at me like he expected me to sit too. He said, we talked for 40 minutes that should have been 5. He told me he worked remotely, something in graphic design, which explained the odd hours and why he was always home when I came by. He told me he'd moved to the city 2 years ago after a breakup he described in a sentence and a half before changing the subject, quick enough that I understood there was more to it he wasn't ready to say. I told him about Marcus, about my dog, about the community college classes I was taking at night, because delivery driving wasn't supposed to be forever, just a bridge to something else, though I hadn't figured out what yet. "You'll figure it out," he said, like it was simple, like he had faith in me that I didn't entirely have in myself. "You got that thing, I don't know. Like you're paying attention. Most people aren't paying attention to anything. You're paying attention to me," I said before I could stop myself. He didn't look away. That was the thing about Adam. He never looked away first. "Yeah," he said, "I am." The rain kept falling outside. Neither of us moved to end the conversation. And for a moment, just a moment, something passed between us that felt heavier than small talk, heavier than coffee and borrowed shirts, something that made the air in the room feel thinner, like we were both waiting for the other to say the thing neither of us had said yet. Then my phone buzzed. Dispatch, asking where I was. I stood up too fast, apologized too much, handed him back the mug like it might explode. He walked me to the door, and for a second, just a second, I thought he might close the distance between us. His eyes dropped to my mouth. Mine dropped to his. My heart was doing something violent and uneven in my chest. "Stay dry out there, Eli," he said instead, quiet, and opened the door for me. I walked to my truck in the rain without feeling a single drop of it. I didn't have another package for his address for 11 days. I know because I counted. I told myself I wasn't counting, and then I caught myself checking the manifest every single morning, and I had to admit to Marcus over dinner one night that something had shifted, that I couldn't stop thinking about a guy who answered his door in a towel and coffee mugs, and a certainty that made me feel like maybe I didn't have to keep folding myself up small. "So tell him," Marcus said, unhelpfully, like it was that easy. "I don't even know if he's Eli. He gave you a shirt and stared at your mouth in a doorway. I think you know." I didn't know. Or I knew, and I was terrified of being wrong, because being wrong about Adam Reyes felt like it would cost more than I was ready to pay. So instead I did what I always did with things that scared me. I put it away, folded it small, told myself it would keep until I was braver. On day 12, Dispatch handed me a package for his address, and my whole body went warm and cold at once. I knocked. The door opened. He wasn't wearing a towel this time. He was wearing a look I'd never seen on him before. Something quieter, something that had clearly been waiting for me the whole 11 days I'd been waiting for him. "I was starting to think you switched routes," he said. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten me," I said back, and something in his face cracked open, warm and unguarded, and he stepped back from the door the way he had in the rain. "Come in," he said. "I think we need to talk about something." I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I didn't know what was going to happen next. I only knew I want to find out. He didn't sit down right away. That was the first thing I noticed. Adam, who always moved like he owned whatever room he was in, stood by his own couch with his arms crossed over his chest, looking at the floor like it had something written on it he needed to read carefully before he said whatever he'd been building up to for 11 days. I stayed by the door, package still in my hands, because some instinct told me if I set it down, I'd be admitting this wasn't a delivery anymore. That something else was starting. "You can put that down, Eli," he said, without looking up. "It's just a box." I sat on the counter. My hands were doing that thing again, the thing they did around him, not quite steady, not quite mine. "I've been thinking about you," he said finally, and the words landed in the room like something breakable. More than I should be thinking about a guy who delivers my packages twice a week. "Is there a right amount to think about someone?" I asked, because my mouth apparently worked better than my brain when I was nervous. That got a small laugh out of him, some of the tension breaking loose from his shoulders. "I don't know. I used to think there was. I used to think you could keep things in their lane. This is a friend. This is a coworker. This is someone I think about it too, in the morning for absolutely no good reason." He finally looked up at me. "You've been in the wrong lane since the first day you showed up soaking wet on my doorstep." And I opened the door in a towel like an idiot. I liked the towel, I admitted, and immediately wanted to sink through his floor. His whole face changed. Something loosened in it. Some guard he'd been holding just dropped, and he crossed the room in 3 steps until he was close enough that I could feel the heat off him, close enough that I had to tip my head back slightly to keep looking at him. "Eli," he said, quiet now, careful like my name was something he wanted to get right. "I need to know if this is just me. Because if it's just me, tell me now, and I'll never make it weird, I promise. But if it's not just me, it's not just me," I said before he could even finish. "It's not just you. God, Adam, it's not just you." For a second, neither of us moved. The rain from 2 weeks ago had stopped, but the air in his apartment still felt charged the same way, thick with everything unsaid. His eyes moved to my mouth again, like they had in the doorway, and this time I didn't look away, and neither did he, and this time there was nothing pulling us apart. No dispatch call, no schedule, no rain to hide in. He lifted a hand, slow enough that I could have stopped him, and brushed his thumb along my jaw like he was checking I was real. "Can I?" he started. "Yes," I said, before he'd even finished the question, because whatever he was about to ask, the answer had been yes since the first towel. He kissed me like he'd been waiting exactly as long as I had. Careful at first, like he was giving me every chance to change my mind, and then not careful at all, one hand sliding into my still damp hair, the other settling warm at my waist like it belonged there. I kissed him back with 2 years of folded-up silence finally coming undone, and it didn't feel like a risk anymore. It felt like relief. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing like he'd run somewhere. "That was better than the coffee," he said, and I laughed against his mouth, and he kissed me again just to feel me laughing. I want to tell you it was simple after that we became one of those couples people talk about with a kind of wistful envy. They just fit from the very first day. And for a while, almost was that simple. For a few weeks that autumn, my delivery route became the best part of every single day. I'd find reasons to take the long way to his street. He'd text me his schedule like a boy passing notes, letting me know when he'd be between calls, when he could open the door for more than 60 seconds. We didn't rush anything. He was patient with me in a way I didn't know men could be patient. Patient with the fact that I still hadn't told my family. Patient with the fact that I flinched sometimes when he reached for my hand in public, an old habit I was trying to unlearn. He never made me feel small for it. He just waited, hand open, until I was ready to take it. "You don't owe the world an explanation," he told me once, late at night, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing slow shapes on my arm. "You just owe yourself honesty. The rest comes when it comes." I believed him. I wanted so badly to believe that things could stay that gentle. The trouble started, the way trouble usually does, with something small enough that I almost let it go. Adam had a friend, Nate, a guy from his design work who came around more than I expected, who laughed too easily at things Adam said, and touched his arm in ways that made something ugly and unfamiliar twist in my chest. I'd never been jealous before. I didn't know what to do with the feeling, so I did the thing I always did with feelings I didn't know how to hold. I folded it small and said nothing. Until the night I came by unannounced, a bag of the takeout he loved in my hand, some half-formed plan to surprise him, and found Nate's jacket thrown over the back of the couch and the two of them laughing in the kitchen, standing closer than I could make myself feel okay about. Adam saw my face before I said a single word. "Eli, this isn't." "It's fine," I said, in the voice I used when things were the opposite of fine. And I put the takeout on the counter and left before either of them could stop me, before I had to hear whatever explanation was coming, because some small, terrified part of me was already convinced I knew how this story went. People like Adam, easy, warm, wanted by everyone in every room he walked into, didn't stay. Not with someone like me, someone who still flinched at holding hands on a sidewalk. My phone buzzed all night. I didn't answer it. By morning there were 7 texts and 2 missed calls, and the last text just said, "Please, let me explain. You matter too much for this to be how it ends." I stared at that message for a long time, sitting on the edge of my bed, Marcus asleep down the hall, my chest aching in a way I didn't have a name for yet. Because the truth was, some tangled up part of me wasn't just afraid of losing Adam. I was afraid of how much it would hurt if I did. A kind of hurt I'd never let myself risk before because I'd never let anyone close enough to cause it. I didn't text back that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, there was a package waiting at the depot for his address, and my hands were shaking before I even picked it up off the shelf. I stood in the depot parking lot for 10 minutes with his package on the passenger seat before I made myself start the engine. Marcus had told me that morning, over burnt toast and too much coffee, that running from hard conversations had never once made them easier. It just meant I had them later, alone, with no one there to hear me say the things I actually meant. I hated that he was right. I drove to Adams Street anyway. His car was in the driveway. Nate's wasn't. Small mercy, though it didn't do much to slow the pounding in my chest as I walked up those same front steps I'd climbed a dozen times before, package in one hand, my whole future feeling like it hinged on the next 60 seconds. He opened the door before I even knocked. He must have heard the truck. He didn't look like the Adam I knew. Easy, certain, always so sure of himself. He looked like he hadn't slept, hair a mess, eyes rimmed red like he'd spent 3 days doing exactly what I'd been doing, replaying the worst version of everything. "You came," he said, like he didn't quite believe it. "I have your package," I said, which was such a stupid, small thing to say, but it was the only sentence I trusted myself with. He almost laughed, but came out broken instead. "Of course you do." He stepped back from the door. "Please, just 5 minutes. If you still want to leave after that, I won't call, I won't text. I'll switch delivery services if I have to. Just give me 5 minutes first." I went inside. The takeout bag was still on the counter, untouched, gone cold days ago. Somehow that detail undid something in me more than anything he could have said. "Nate's my ex," Adam said, before I'd even set the package down. "From before I moved here. We're friends now. Barely. Honestly, we hadn't talked in months until he texted saying he was in town for work and wanted to catch up. I told him to come by because I didn't think it would matter, because there was nothing left there to matter, and I was an idiot for not telling you first, for not thinking about how it would look, because you've spent your whole life being told your feelings don't get to matter out loud, and the last thing I ever wanted was to make you feel like that in my own home. I stood very still, listening, because some part of me had been braced for excuses, and instead I was getting the truth, offered up plain and unguarded, exactly the way he'd always offered everything to me. "I should have told you Nate was coming," he went on, voice rougher now. "I should have called the second I saw your face at that door instead of standing there stunned. I've spent 3 days hating myself for not chasing you down the driveway. I kept thinking, what if he doesn't come back? What if I finally found the one person who made me want to stop being careful with my own heart, and I lost him because I wasn't careful enough with his? I got scared. I admitted, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. Not just about Nate. About all of it. About how much I stopped, made myself finish it. About how much I've started needing you. I've never let myself need anyone like that. It terrified me, and it was easier to believe you'd leave than to believe you might actually stay. Adam crossed the space between us slow, giving me every chance to step back the way he always had. I didn't step back. I'm not Nate, he said quietly. I'm not anyone who's hurt you before. I know I can't undo whatever taught you to expect people to leave. But I can keep showing up anyway, every single day, for as long as you'll let me, until some part of you finally believes it. That might take a while, I said, my throat tight. I've got time, he said, and reached for my hand. Not fast, not forcing anything, just open, palm up, the same way he always did, waiting. I took it. We didn't fix everything in one conversation. That's not how it works. Not really, not outside of movies. But we started, really started, honestly, without the folded-up silence I've been carrying my whole life. I told him things that week I never told anyone, not even Marcus. About my family, about the years of swallowing myself smaller and smaller until I almost forgot what my own voice sounded like. He listened to all of it without flinching, without trying to fix what didn't need fixing, just holding my hand across his kitchen table while I finally let some of it out into the open air. And slowly, the fear I'd been carrying, the certainty that good things were borrowed, not kept, started to loosen its grip. 3 weeks later, I brought him to meet Marcus properly, not just as the guy for my route, but as Adam, my boyfriend, a word that still felt enormous and new every time I said it out loud. Marcus took one look at the two of us standing in his doorway, Adam's hand resting easy and certain at the small of my back, and just grinned like he'd known this was coming since the first burnt toast conversation. Finally, he said, I was running out of ways to say, I told you so. 6 months later, I still deliver packages on that same route. Though these days I take detours I don't need to take, and dispatch has stopped asking why my afternoon runs take an extra 10 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Adam still answers the door in a towel sometimes, mostly because he knows exactly what it does to me, and he still hands me coffee I no longer pretend I have to refuse. Some nights, lying tangled together on that same leather couch where he first told me he'd been thinking about me more than he should, I think about how close I came to walking away. How easily fear could have written a different ending to this story. But I didn't walk away. I knocked on a door, and someone opened it. And instead of hiding the parts of myself I'd spent a lifetime folding small, I finally let someone see all of it. He saw all of it, and he stayed anyway. That, it turns out, is the whole story. Not the towel, not the rain, not even the almost kiss in a doorway. Just two people, brave enough, eventually, to stop being careful with each other's hearts. A year to the day since I first knocked on his door with a package and no idea what was about to happen to my life, Adam asked me to move in. He didn't make a production of it. That was never his style, not with the things that actually mattered. It was a regular Tuesday, take-out containers on the coffee table, my work boots by his door, where they'd started living without either of us really deciding it. He just looked at me across the couch, easy and certain the way he always was, and said, You're basically here every night anyway. I'd just like to stop pretending your apartment is anything but a place your mail goes. That's not exactly the speech I imagined, I said, laughing. You want a speech? He set his container down, took my hand the way he always did, palm up, patient. Fine. Eli Turner, you showed up soaking wet on my doorstep with a box I don't even remember the contents of, and somehow you're the best thing that's ever walked into my life. I don't want to keep saying goodbye to you at the end of every night. I want to fall asleep knowing you're already home. Move in with me. I said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. Some habits, it turns out, are worth keeping. I told my family that spring. Not everything went the way I'd hoped. Some things take longer to heal than others, and I've made peace with the fact that not every door opens the way Adam's always has. But my mother came around, slowly, in her own careful way, and the first time she met Adam, she watched him make me laugh across her kitchen table, and something in her face softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. He looks at you like you're the whole point of the room, she told me quietly, doing dishes, not looking at me directly because that was easier for her. I didn't understand for a long time. I think I do now. That was enough. It was more than I'd let myself hope for. People ask me sometimes, half joking, whether it's strange being with someone I met on a work route, whether it feels like something out of a story too neat to be real. I tell them the truth. Nothing about it felt neat in the moment. It felt terrifying and uncertain and slow, built one small brave choice at a time. A doorway, a rainstorm, a hand held out and finally taken. But I also tell them this. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is knock on a door you're scared to open and find out someone on the other side has been hoping you would. Adam still answers that same door in a towel every now and then. I still forget how to speak every single time, even a year later. Some things I've learned you don't outgrow. You just get to keep them.